The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. It is Friday, March 7th. Happy Friday. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm a little pissed off. I usually don't get emotional about what's going on in the news, but I am, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second. One of the reasons is the deep state is undaunted, and we're going to talk about what's going on with their reaction to the Trump administration and Trump going around and breaking all their toys. Well, let's get into the headlines for today, Friday, March 7th. And I'll talk about what I mean. All right, I'm going to start out here with the Wall Street Journal. Trump sells economic vision as no pain, no gain. In his address to Congress, the president played up the benefits of ramped up tariffs and an immigration crackdown, but he did admit to the fact that there may be some financial discomfort or economic discomfort in the beginning, and there may be. I always compare it, and I have been comparing it to Javier Milei in Argentina, and if you're going to go through any severe change in policy, you're going to have some problems. But the big problem is today is the economic pain people are feeling today has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with Biden. And even with the terrible inflation numbers coming out of the COVID pandemic, the Biden administration kept spending to the very last day. And that's why we have the economic problems we have now. Now, I'm no economist, but I'm telling you that that's the reason. There's no other, you cannot blame Trump for economic problems. He's only been in office and hasn't even passed the budget. So how could he be responsible for anything having to do with the economy? And no, sanctions have not been put in place yet. I believe some have against China, but the other ones are still on hold. All right, let's go to that next headline from Just the News. Trump signs executive order creating the U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve. And then CNN, Trump creates a strategic Bitcoin reserve one day ahead of the White House crypto summit. So this is a smart move going into the future. Everybody should be diversified. I don't own any Bitcoin. I think everybody's portfolio should have some. Mine doesn't. I can't, if I had the money originally and I understood it as I understood it now, I probably would have put some money into Bitcoin, but now it's a little bit harder. But I think it's smart that the U.S. government is getting in on the game. And also remember, Trump's promise is that he would not support a central bank digital currency, which is the way the establishment wants to move. This is one of the reasons I'm pissed off today is because nobody seems to be watching the response from the deep state or the establishment to what Trump and his cabinet seem to be doing. And I'm going to get into that in just a second. But first, the National Review. Rubio says Trump administration will have zero tolerance for pro-Hamas agitators on student visas, and they shouldn't. I had mentioned previously that citizens of the United States should, and I believe do, enjoy more freedom of speech than a foreign national that's here and can be seen as an agitator or even an agent of a foreign state. So I don't believe that their freedom of speech goes to the extent than that of a citizen. The New York Post is reporting U.S. Yanks first visa of foreign student linked to Hamas supporting disruptions on college campuses. I'm glad about this. First of all, people don't know how intelligence operatives work or whether they're witting or unwitting. It's the same thing with Black Lives Matter. The leaders of the Black Lives Matter protests were paid agitators, usually paid by NGOs, not necessarily from Black Lives Matter themselves, but some were. And it works the same with foreign nationals. So some of these students, or some aren't even students, are paid to cause disruption and to agitate, and understanding the United States laws on free speech, to go around and protest and to get more seriously and specifically to get other people, American citizens, to protest. So these people should be highly scrutinized. And indeed, if they're causing any sort of disruption that may be considered hateful or a hate crime or anywhere in that realm, that it could be seen as discriminatory, they should be removed, because that's actually a crime. So if you didn't hear, the Wall Street Journal reports House censures Representative Al Green as Democrats face fallout from Trump protest. Texas lawmaker interrupted president address in protest of Medicaid cuts. Is that what he said? I guess that's what the Wall Street Journal is quoting him as saying. Yeah, I don't know about that. He kept yelling about, you don't have a mandate. So I guess the Wall Street Journal is just going by what Al Green said. It was hard to determine what he even was saying, but I didn't hear anything about Medicaid cuts, and there hasn't been any Medicaid cuts. So why would he disrupt? And this is my problem. It's one thing if you yell out that somebody might be lying or you disagree, but to stand up and shout for something that isn't even really contested. There are no Medicaid cuts. And if you saw some of the signs on the liberal side of the aisle, the Democrat side of the aisle, none of it was true. Stop cutting Medicaid. Medicaid hasn't been cut. Musk steals. He didn't steal. He hasn't been proven to steal anything. So I don't know what they're talking about. It seems like it was all performative when they really didn't have any issue to stand by. So breaking news today, the New York Post is reporting Trump envoys meeting with Ukraine officials next week in Saudi Arabia seeking an initial ceasefire. And then Zero Hedge is reporting on this story. High-level U.S.-Ukraine meeting set for Riyadh after Zelensky apologizes. So did he apologize? I'm not really sure he apologized, but the Zero Hedge reports that Trump saw a letter that apparently Zelensky wrote. And he said, as a good first step, there was an apology and acknowledgement that the U.S. has done so much for Ukraine and a sense of gratitude. According to Witkoff, who's the Middle East envoy, other sources cast it as a tacit apology. I knew Zelensky wouldn't give a full-throated apology. It should be. But when you're negotiating, you can't box people into a corner. You have to allow them to wriggle out. And so Trump is allowing him to wriggle out of his outrageous, disrespectful acts in the Oval Office. Like, if he felt that way, you don't litigate in front of the press. Everybody knows that, especially if you're a head of state. But Fox News is reporting a pro-Ukraine GOP representative, Bacon, declares real Republicans know that Putin's Russia hates the West and freedom. I'm for helping to Ukraine to win. Representative Don Bacon has said, this is one of the reasons I'm pissed, is because fuckheads like this. First of all, everybody knows they did this with the Islamic terrorists too. They hate us for our freedom. Russia hates the West and freedom. Putin and Russia don't hate the West. They're looking out for Russia. So I don't know what the problem there is. I have a little bit of problem with that to begin with. All right, let's move on to the next article here. CNN forced to fact check itself after claiming Trump lied about transgender mice. So if you didn't hear this during Trump's address, if you didn't hear Trump's address to the joint session of Congress, Trump had mentioned one of the line items that Doge found was that they spent $20 million or some ridiculous amount on making mice transgender. And again, always when fact-checking Trump, when news organizations fact-check Trump, what they do is they nitpick. So if something is partially true or maybe a little exaggerated, they immediately call it false. Well, that's a mischaracterization because it's not false, it's partly true. And maybe if he exaggerated the number, or in this case, he said $20 million to make mice transgender. Well, that wasn't the object or the stated goal of the experiment. Let's get into the story. So it goes into say Trump in his address talked about appalling waste in government, making mice transgender. It was 8 million, excuse me. But CNN said taxpayers are spending millions on research trying to prove that it's okay to pump boys full of estrogen and girls full of testosterone. In CNN, instead of acknowledging the absurdity of such waste and funding, the news outlet immediately denounced the statement as false in their bogus fact check of Trump's speech, and other members of the propaganda press followed suit. But now CNN has been forced to walk back in its own reporting that President Donald Trump's statement was a lie. Well, because it wasn't a lie. Doge and transgender mice. Trump falsely claimed that the Department of Government Efficiency identified government spending of $8 million for making mice transgender. Well, they didn't do that. The article has since been updated with the editor's note admitting an earlier version of this item incorrectly characterized. That's a mischaracterization. As false Trump's claim about federal funding being spent for making mice transgender. Incorrectly characterized. It's a mischaracterization. The update claimed to add context to Trump's statement, but the context essentially admits that Trump was right. It said in the morning after Trump's speech, the White House provided a list of $8.3 million in federal grants to health studies that involved mice receiving treatments that can be used in gender-affirming health care, which is a misnomer. The updated version reads the White House list made clear that Trump in the speech did not. The studies were meant to figure out how these treatments might affect the health of humans who take them, not for the purpose of making mice transgender. Well, exactly. We all know that, but that's what it does. So the extent of the experiment, giving mice estrogen and testosterone, makes mice transgender. But the purpose of the study was to see how these drugs would affect humans. Well, what does it do in humans? And this is why they give it as gender affirming care, is to make people transgender. So it indeed was true that Trump was correct when he said the study, the $8.3 million, indeed was spent to make mice transgender. Whether that was the stated goal of the experiment, probably not. So, more headlines from the Wall Street Journal. Secrecy and turmoil dominate RFK Jr.'s first weeks as health secretary. Internal strife, measles outbreak, curb his efforts to tackle chronic disease and other priorities. So this is what pisses me off. This is one of the reasons I'm so aggravated today, is one of the way the establishment is striking back and will strike back time and time again, and I'm going to get into the ways they do that right now, is in the effect of creating crises where previously no crises exist. In the same way the FBI interviewed General Flynn days into the administration, the same way they're creating crises in the opening days after confirmation of these cabinet heads. So Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Marco Rubio, they're all going to face crises meant to derail them. And the whole purpose is to create a problem with that exists within the Trump administration, so they could see these people aren't prepared and they need to be removed, or we need new department heads, we need establishment people back. And it's basically, you have a student juggler who could juggle 2 or 3 balls, and you start throwing more balls at him, knowing that a new person just learning juggling, particularly in the early stages, is not going to be able to juggle like a professional. So that's basically what they're doing, putting more balls in the mix. The Dallas Morning News is reporting vitamin A, cod liver oil. Experts say there's no replacement for measles vaccination. So that's what RFK Jr. said, is that to be healthy, you should take supplements or to fight off disease. Food and supplements such as cod liver oil are not an alternative for measles vaccination. They're urging Texans to vaccinate themselves and their children as West Texas measles outbreak continues to grow, and after an unvaccinated child died from illness in Texas. Their concerns come after U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote about vitamin A in a Fox News column responding to the Texas measles outbreak. Kennedy also falsely stated in the past that vaccines cause autism. Well, I have to stop right there for a couple different reasons. Is if you have to say, you should say Kennedy claimed that vaccines cause autism. There's no use in this instance, falsely stated. It's not correct, but at least it's proper, instead of saying falsely claimed, is that we don't know that the vaccines cause autism. It seems like some versions of the stacked MMR vaccine, which is the measles, mumps, and rubella, that the adjuvants in those stacked vaccines, each part of the vaccine had different adjuvants, and those adjuvants together caused this issue. At least some studies suggest that that's the case. So it's not really a false claim. Until you can prove what causes autism, I think you should stand down. And that's another part of my anger today. And I'm pretty fucking angry because of this sort of shit. Because the medical establishment has no right to claim much of anything. So the article goes on to say, Kennedy's comments in the column and that the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention recommend vitamin A for people hospitalized with measles, and that studies have found vitamin A can help prevent measles deaths are not inaccurate. So, so they say it's no, in the beginning of the article, in the lead, they say vitamin A is no replacement for vaccination because they want people to get vaccinated. But then they admit 2 paragraphs later that actually even the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention says vitamin A is recommended for people hospitalized with measles, and that studies have found that vitamin A can prevent death. So what's the fucking problem? Because what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said in that article, in that column, he didn't say take vitamin A and don't get vaccinated. He said if you don't get vaccinated, you should take vitamin A. Washington Post also, the second death reported in growing measles outbreak in New Mexico. New York Times, unvaccinated, and they lead with unvaccinated. New Mexico resident dies of suspected measles. Suspected. The patient tested positive for the infection, but state officials could not confirm that it was the cause of death. So this is very reminiscent of COVID, where people would die of motorcycle accidents and the like, and because they had COVID or purportedly tested positive for COVID, that they would contribute that death to COVID because that was the order. Everybody who dies with COVID should be listed as dying of COVID. And that's why you had the exorbitant numbers that were inaccurate. But even now, reporting in the past, it's the fucking establishment again that won't correct the bad reporting that happened during the pandemic. The story goes on to say, an unvaccinated person who died in New Mexico has tested positive for measles, state officials said on Thursday, possibly the second such fatality in a growing outbreak that began in West Texas. Officials have not yet confirmed that measles was the cause of death and saying that the person did not seek medical treatment before dying. But the question is, did they take vitamin A? Probably not. And why is all this happening? Well, it's to throw a wrench in the works for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he's going to face many. And don't forget that these 2 communities in New Mexico and bordering in Texas were Mennonite communities, and the Quakers and the Mennonites don't take part in worldly contemporary activity, medical treatment or dress or technology at all. And so it's part of their lifestyle that they refuse technology, including vaccines. So what? I'm not telling people not to get vaccines. I would advise people to know when you're taking medication that there are cons or side effects, or they can lead to detrimental health outcomes if you're not prepared. Is it 1 in 1,000? Maybe. Are you that 1 in 1,000? Could be. So why are they doing all this? Because the Federalist reported last month, making America healthy again starts with addressing the root causes of infertility. And that's what RFK Jr. was planning on doing. You can't have the chronic disease in America is staggering. And there's a lot of money being made on it. So there's a purposeful cycle that's happening here. There are things that you eat and take that cause disease, and then you're treated for the disease, and then that treatment for the disease causes another disease, and so on and so on and so on. And once you go down that road, it tends to snowball. And people don't realize, could it be the medication I'm taking? The doctor will tell you, no, certainly not. Post-Millennial is reporting, Christine Noem says, New York City refused to honor ICE detainer on illegal immigrant charge with setting woman on fire. The ICE lodged an immigration detainer with the New York City Department of Corrections to take this depraved alien into custody, but the Department of Corrections in New York City refused. So this guy's an illegal immigrant who burned someone to death. But New York City doesn't want him deported. He'd rather have New York City taxpayers pay for this guy to be incarcerated. Yes, he's an illegal immigrant felon, but he's our illegal immigrant felon. More news from PJ Media. Attorney General Pam Bondi, still unreleased Epstein files to be redacted for national security. And she just said, we're going to go through it as fast as we can, cautiously to protect the victims. Yeah. National security, some grand jury information, which is always going to be confidential. But we'll see, she said. Let's look through them as fast as we can and get it out to the American people. Not only that, but on Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. I call bullshit. Something's going on here, and I call bullshit. So you want to go ahead and redact confidential information, national security information, whatever. We need to get to the bottom of this because we haven't gotten any information. I don't believe Epstein is even dead. So I believe he was a intelligence asset, and that, because there were too many things going on there for him to be killed or to get out of jail there before testifying. Sorry, I don't believe it. I never believed that Thomas Crooks did what he did in Butler, shoot at the president without any coaxing by anybody. I just don't believe that to be the case. A lone gunman, come on. Everything that you hear is probably false. And that's the way it should be looked. You should look at it in that way, that no matter what, that what you're being told is not the truth, not the full truth to any extent. NBC News reports the MAGA world turns against Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett. The Trump-appointed justice has shifted the court to the right, but she angered some in the MAGA world by voting against some of President Donald Trump's priorities. I never liked her. And most people in the know never liked her either. Why? Well, because if you look into her background, she was an authoritarian who consistently sided with the establishment. So that's not somebody I want on the Supreme Court. So whether she was a DEI hire, we got to put a woman in there, what have you. She is not an originalist. She is not on the side of justice. She is on the side of protecting the establishment. If you look at her record since she's been on the Supreme Court, she was for the vaccine mandate. Washington Post Justice Amy Coney Barrett ignites anger on the right after ruling against Trump. I never liked her. I don't. And this is another reason why I'm pissed, is the mainstream media tries to, oh, look, there's a rift in MAGA. There was never, most of us never liked her as a pick. But I think Trump was overwhelmed after two nominees that faced, like, especially not just Gorsuch, but Kavanaugh faced a hard time getting in. Maybe he thought that was a good course of action. But you needed another originalist in there, and I don't think she is one. The story goes on to say Barrett and Chief Justice John Roberts joined the court's three liberals in backing a federal judge's order that requires the administration to begin repaying global health groups nearly $2 billion for completed work. I'm not saying that it's fair, but I said that the problem is with appropriated funds, you have to pay that out because it's an act of Congress. So, you know, I don't agree with the ruling per se, but I knew it was going to fall down that way. It's executive power. You know, does the executive have the right to execute in the manner he sees fit? Zero hedge, new European Union carbon market set to hammer households and small businesses. Now, what's this all about? Carbon credits. If you don't know, the goal of all this climate change nonsense is to tax you for carbon. What is the end game here? The end game here is to target you for breathing. Because what do you exhale? Carbon dioxide. That's the end game. So the actual blueprint for what's going on is to tax you for your carbon footprint. So if you generate electricity or power, I should say power, not just electricity. If you generate power, your motor vehicle or what have you, if you generate carbon, then you will be taxed on that carbon. Now, will the elite be taxed? Will certain groups and certain people be exempt? Most certainly. But this is the end game, is to tax you for emitting carbon, which is what you do when you breathe. And it's already been proposed. So, more news on the international front. Fox News, UN prepping for spending cuts as Doge roots out waste in U.S. Internal docs show. The memo tells department heads to prepare to work with 80% of their budgets. Just like NATO, just like anything really, any global organization in the world gets the majority of their funding from the United States. That has to stop. If the WHO and the UN are fronting for China, then China should pay the most. But they don't. And another thing is China should no longer be considered a developing nation, nor should India. The Associated Press reports China's foreign minister criticizes U.S. tariffs, accuses country of meeting good with evil. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China will continue, Communist China, Associated Press, Communist China will continue to retaliate for the United States' arbitrary tariffs. I didn't know they're arbitrary. And accused Washington of meeting good with evil. Haha, that's a funny one. in a press conference Friday on the sidelines of the country's annual parliamentary session. China's parliament? Well, the Associated Press makes out like communist China is a democracy. It is not. Wang said China's efforts to help the U.S. contain its fentanyl crisis have been met with punitive tariffs, which are straining their ties. They haven't done much at all in that regard. No country should fantasize that it can suppress China and maintain a good relationship with China at the same time, Wang said. Such two-faced acts are not good for the stability of bilateral relations or for building mutual trust. China lies all the time. And they are our adversary. So, first of all, they should never have been admitted to the WTO. Kissinger and Nixon's overtures toward communist China were a mistake. And I know the purpose behind it. But at this point, the Trump administration, the United States, needs to extricate itself from the intertwined trade that leaves us vulnerable. Most of our antibiotics are made in China. That's wrong. Shouldn't happen. Most of our rare earth minerals are that we use for chip making or that Taiwan uses for chip making are secured by China. And that's why this rare earth mineral deal with Ukraine is so important. And if we were friendly with Russia, we would get them out of the yoke of China and trade with them, and they have rare earth minerals. Realistically, the global battle against the deep state and the establishment is the battle against socialism, because that's the system for 200 years now that they want to push on people for the simple reason of placating the people with a government for you, even if it's an authoritarian government. It's handouts. And the thing with handouts is, it might seem good in the beginning, but then who decides how much handout you get? Do you? No, you don't. The people that are handing it out do. And so they just titrate or constrict the amount they're giving to you. And what are you going to do about it? All right, the war on Musk continues. Wall Street Journal is reporting Tesla's fortunes fan as Musk rises in Trump world. CEO's politics erode brand's appeal among some core buyers of electric vehicles. I used to idolize this guy, so people say. So what's happening here is a grassroots attack on Elon Musk and an establishment elite attack. So the elite attack started with sabotage and continues to this day with sabotage in the elite circles with SpaceX. And that started when he bought Twitter and made it a free speech platform. And he started sounding on the right. And, well, people in the establishment didn't like that. And these people, he's the richest man in the world, so he has a lot to fall back on. But when the establishment, the elite embrace you, they hold it against you if you don't follow the letter. So he didn't. He said, I'm the richest man in the world. I can do whatever I want. And so they started sabotaging SpaceX. Then, when he jumped on board with Trump, the grassroots or the anarchists started attacking Tesla. And basic academic liberals did the same. They don't like driving around in their Tesla now. They thought they were saving the planet, driving an electric vehicle. And now they don't like it because Musk is with Trump. Instead of asking the question, why is Musk with Trump? I mean, you had one of these people say, I used to idolize this guy. But I don't now because he's with Trump. And that was why the psyop against Trump was so successful. Is it got people to have an emotional, visceral reaction to Trump. Anything Trump does or says or what have you, people have a visceral reaction. And so there's no way that they could ever, and you saw it with the Democrats sitting, if he would cure cancer, Democrats wouldn't applaud. Going back to sabotage, the Mediaite reports FAA halts flights after Musk's Starship rocket explodes and rains down debris. So this is the second test flight in a row of Starship that ended in disaster, an abortion. They aborted the flight, which means self-destruct. They landed the booster safely, but the vehicle had to be destroyed because it went off course. I say sabotage. The thing with rocketry and space flight, you have to do a lot of testing because the science is difficult. But if you look at SpaceX's record before he bought X or Twitter and after, you will see a degradation of success. Why is that? He all of a sudden, he took his eye off the ball. He was so interested in X that SpaceX floundered. That's not the case. I believe there's sabotage involved. With no proof, mind you, I speculate. The article goes on to say, like the launch of SpaceX's 7th Starship test flight, the 8th attempt also ended in the craft's disintegration. About 8 minutes after launch from Brownsville, Texas, several engines appeared to fail, and the 400-foot tall rocket was last seen spinning before communication was lost. Several users on social media posted videos of the rocket breaking up and falling earthward. Here's my issue. The rocket engines appeared to fail. How does that happen? A lot of the modern rockets now work on electronics to ignite and to fire and burn. So was the rocket faulty or were the signals faulty? It's a lot of intricate electronics and obviously rocket material, etc. There's a lot that could go wrong there. But to me, it seems suspicious. More articles about Elon Musk. The Washington Times is reporting that Musk amplifies campaign urging Trump to pardon convicted George Floyd killer Derek Chauvin. Well, first of all, Derek Chauvin, the police officer Derek Chauvin, is not George Floyd's killer. But first I want to address one thing. That Trump should pardon Derek Chauvin at the end of his term. There's no point to do it now. It wouldn't be politically prudent because, Trump again would be labeled a racist, and it just, for what it is, Mr. Chauvin's going to have to serve another 3 or 4 years in prison. Sorry. However, Derek Chauvin used a legal restraint, a knee on the back of the neck of a suspect that was resisting arrest. He was resisting arrest. He was resisting arrest. He was resisting arrest. So if you resist arrest, you need to be physically restrained. So he used a legal restraint. And I don't care what the officer said or the coroner said or whatever. He did not die of strangulation because there's no way to strangle somebody when you have your knee on the back of their neck. That's not where their windpipe is. So he did not die of asphyxiation. It's early, excuse me. He died of a drug overdose, more than likely. Heart failure. In my humble opinion. So the whole thing was a sham. First, they traumatize people with COVID, and then they give them a catalyst. So if you knew how the Arab Spring started, you would understand in better context what the thing with George Floyd was. And it was way more contrived than what actually happened in Tunisia, or the Arab Spring, where Tunisian secret police beat and strangled a young man, a boy, to death. Way different than what happened in Minneapolis. UK Independent is reporting mysterious unmanned warship spotted off Washington state coast. The Defiant, which is the name of the warship, may have a role in the U.S. Navy's drone hellscape to help defend Taiwan from Chinese aggression. So this is a show. Like the military parades of communist nations, also in the West, you perform a show as a part of your overall deterrent. So this is a test vehicle that was put in production and was finished a few weeks ago. And so it's a test sale. And it's an unmanned drone warship. So just like the fighter jets, all the military equipment is going to unmanned and very soon autonomous drones. So drone ships, drone planes, drone helicopters. I live near Sikorsky that makes the Black Hawk. Drone Black Hawks, same thing. Obviously can be remote controlled, and I think that had something to do with the air crash there in Washington, D.C. A month or two ago. So that all has to be looked at as the coming warfare. As I said, China believes they're at war with the United States already. It's a fifth generational war. And for them to scold us when they're actually at war with us, particularly in terms of espionage and other, heinous acts, it's the same thing with Russia. Everybody knows we're at war with Russia. It's not Ukraine. So who is the belligerent one here? Well, it shouldn't be the U.S., but it has been. The problem is they cozy up to China and then they attack Russia. Very strange. More of our escapades around the world. Zero Hedges reporting civil war is now official. Syria erupts into worst bloodshed since Assad's fall. So what's happening here? Alawites, which is a sect, a Syrian sect. So the Assads were Alawite. So Syria has a big Alawite, Druid, Christian, and Muslim populations, much like Lebanon did. Lebanon was like the Europe of the Middle East. They had Christians, Druids, Alawites as well, Muslims. But when the Muslims come in, they start bloodletting, killing Christians. We saw it during the Arab Spring in Egypt. start killing Christians, infidels, Alawites, etc. But don't forget, we're the ones who funded and organized, basically ISIS is who took over Syria. It wasn't the Kurds. ISIS, the Islamic militants, fight the Kurds. So we put Islamic militants in charge of Syria, which is an advanced Middle East nation. Bad idea. Not that I prefer Assad. I certainly don't. But they should immediately have democratic elections. And hopefully they won't, like the Palestinians in Gaza, vote to have Islamic militants as your political representatives. U.S. News and World Report, officials, no signs of shooter or victims after reports of gunshots at naval base in Florida. A Florida sheriff says there are no signs of an active shooter or no injuries after police responded to a report of gunshots at Corey Station, a naval installation in Pensacola. Just look up the Navy Yard shooting in D.C. Aaron Alexis mysteriously shot up a bunch of people at the Naval Yard. Why was he there? Why did he have a shotgun? Why did he scratch into the shotgun, "This is my ELF weapon"? Extra low frequency or extreme low frequency. You know what ELF is? Supposedly used in mind control. Aaron Alexis believed he was being mind controlled. The Naval Psychiatric Department is the lead of psychological operations, psychological warfare, psychological manipulation. You might have heard of Alex Jones talk about this recently if you watch his show. But the Aurora Theater shooter, I forget what that guy's name was, he was in a DARPA psychological program. His father was the lead of that very psychological program in DARPA. And then he ends up doing this mass shooting. Okay, let's go back to the story. No signs of shooter or victims after reports of gunshots at naval base in Florida. Well, then what happened here? You ever watch the movie any of the Jason Bourne movies or the Manchurian Candidate or any of these movies where they mind control service members and get them to shoot to be susceptible to triggers, which then leads them into mass shooting, or in the case of Manchurian Candidate, assassination. So who knows what happened at this naval base? Was it a psychological program? Were they getting ready another mass shooter? The way it works is these people get trained, witting or unwitting, and then they're given a trigger, usually a verbal or audio trigger, sometimes a visual trigger that gets them started on their rampage. And then when they're done, they kill themselves. Why? They either come to their senses and just feel guilty, or that was part of the operation itself. There's your conspiracy for the day. Speaking of conspiracy, though, the post-millennial authorities arrest Oregon trans extremist accused of firebombing, shooting up Tesla dealership in Salem. Adam Matthew Lansky, 41, I guess he goes by Lorraine now, or Linda, has been arraigned on federal felony charges. So I spoke about this before when talking about Elon Musk and Tesla. They have sabotage at the top, and then at the grassroots, they have these trans extremist anarchists that will attack you on the street or attack in this case, a Tesla dealership, charging stations, whatever, because these people have been trained OFA style in activism. And they're extremists because they go to violence, but when they were trained in activism, when they take action, you know, just like Antifa, you're taking an action, they don't see it as out of the realm of actions to take. So they're increasingly stepping up their actions because of the frustration. The story goes on to say authorities have arrested a suspect accused of launching several firebombing and shooting attacks on a Tesla dealership in Salem, Oregon. This individual was taken into custody on Tuesday and has been arraigned on felony charges. The defendant is a far-left extremist LGBTQ activist who identifies as transgender. Who's the extremist now? Joe Biden, MAGA extremist. It's not, you know, it's the left. Progressive extremism. And that's why the Democrats are losing. They hitched their wagon to this shit. So if you didn't know what happened with this story, he threw several Molotov cocktails into vehicles, burning the vehicles up, and then shot an AR-15 rifle. He shot into the dealership itself. All right, on to the economy. Now, the economy is a tricky thing because any economic hardship you feel right now is not Donald Trump's fault at all. It is Joe Biden's fault. And the previous administration wreaked so much havoc on the American economy, it's mind-boggling. So Financial Advisors has the headline, Americans fall behind on car payments at highest rates in decades. Car owners are missing their monthly payments at highest rate in more than 30 years. Share of subprime auto borrowers at least 60 days past due on their loans rose to 6.56%. And the most since the data collection began in 1994, according to Fitch Ratings. The economy is not good. We do need to take drastic action. And that's what Trump is trying to do. When people go, oh, it's too fast, it's too far, it's too this, it's too that. Trump, if you're listening, I do want to suggest one thing. One of the big winners of your first time in office was economic zones. And I think you should bring those back. And basically what it was offered incentive into businesses that invest in inner cities. I think that was a great idea, and it helps build the economy from the bottom up versus trickle down. In any case, I hope you take that advice. I know your plate is full, as is ours. We got a couple of minutes left. The Hill, more Americans tapping into 401ks to pay for financial emergencies. Hardship withdrawals hit a record 4.8% in 2024, says Vanguard. I know one of my brother's employees was complaining she had to tap into her 401k. Before the pandemic, the average was around 2% each year. Several factors helped explain the quick change. The economy sucks. There was a job report today that held steady. I think the U.S. added 150,000 jobs in February, which is the same. It's not a great number. Anything over 250,000 is good. So we're well below that, but we are in the Biden administration hangover. And this all relates to Biden. As does this. One American News, Hunter Biden claims financial struggles. Blames drop in art sales and LA fires and legal filing. What was strange about the LA fires and Hunter Biden was that his house All the houses around his house burned except for his. Strange. And don't forget, Biden was still in office when these fires occurred. And he claims that he can't sell his art now. Yeah, like his art wasn't selling access to Joe Biden. It's the same thing when the Clintons left office. The Clinton Foundation, the donations of the Clinton Foundation went down to zero. So nobody wants to pay you if you're not selling access. So that's what the art sales were for. And now his sugar brother isn't helping him, and he spent all his money, millions of dollars, on hookers and cocaine. The story just illustrates recent court filing obtained by the press. A former first son of urged federal judge to withdraw a laptop hacking lawsuit he filed against a former White House advisor, claiming he is millions of dollars in debt and no one is purchasing his artwork. So nobody really knew that he had filed a lawsuit against a former White House advisor for accessing laptop information that was public. And Real Clear Politics is reporting the Democratic fork in the road and the woke repudiation imperative. In the modern Democratic Party, rudderless and confused and reeling from a pitiful collective performance during Tuesday's evening presidential joint address to Congress, now confronts a fork in the road, and that's no joke. On one hand lies the path of least resistance, doubling down on the status quo, the progressive culture warring, woke identity politics driven agenda that has dominated the party ever since Barack Obama upset Hillary Clinton in the 2008 Democratic presidential primary. OFA. On the other hand, lies the more difficult but ultimately more promising path, repudiation of the post-2008 legacy and the conscientious return to a politics of the prudential center. Moderate. Stay away from progressive extremism that like to burn down, like to herald transgender people and burn down Tesla dealerships. I think that's it. We went a few minutes over. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Click that notification bell, thumbs up. Remember, you're under attack psychologically and biologically. Check out the Liberty merch in the link below. Follow me every day, Monday through Friday, live on Rumble at 10 a.m. Check out my other website, libpop.org. Learn about libertarian populism. Stay hip to the trick. And I will see you next week. Respect. I kill you!